up everyone, and thanks for stopping by my channel. And in this video I'm going to show you how I drew these two dogs playing in water using charcoal pencils. So here we are with the outline drawn out, and I'm just going to use a piece of paper to lean my hand and my arm on. And I'm going to start on the left hand side at drawing because I'm right handed and it saves me leaning my hand in a lot of work I've already done. I'm using Clairefontaine paint on mixed media paper, and I'm using General's charcoal pencils in white and black. The first thing I'm doing is just using white charcoal pencil to start adding some fur texture onto this first dog. Because the dogs are wet, the hair's like clumped into sort of like a spiky effect like that it goes into when it gets wet, so that's the effect that I'm trying to get here. So you've got big white curved lines, you know, that go in direction of hair growth, which are going to be representing these little clumps of hair that have gone together because they've got wet. The light source for this is coming from behind dogs, so there's going to be quite a few highlighted areas as well along the backs and tops of their heads and things like that. So there's going to be extra white hairs and texture put on them areas. And now I'm moving on to the water that's behind this dog. I'm going to get this done and finished before doing any more work on anything that's in front of it. And again, I'm coming in with that white charcoal pencil. And now it's really important that you learn to just draw what you see and not what you think you should be seeing. So I'm just looking at the reference photograph and just looking at all the areas that are highlighted and the general kinds of shapes and things like that they form, and I'm just mapping these in. I'm not going to get every single shape and highlight to be exactly the same as reference photo. It's just a case of trying to understand the actual texture, and then you can sort of apply that to your drawing. So your shapes and things and the positioning of them might not be exact to photograph that you're working from, but you're still copying the texture, so to speak. And now I'm just coming in with blending stump, and I'm just going to blend a lot of these highlights. The only highlights I'm going to leave is the ones where there's sparkles on water from light, so it's the absolute lightest. They don't need blending because they're going to be quite well defined anyway, so they don't need any blending. And then I'm going to basically do the same with the black charcoal pencil. I'm going to come in and just start mapping some shapes where you've got your darker areas on water. If you've got any like little mini waves or ripples, the side of the little ripple or wave that the light's not shining on is going to be a little bit darker, so you'd put it along them areas. And just look at how it is in reference photo. The edges of these shapes might be a little bit wavy or curved and things like that, and just map them in. Just study the nature of the shapes of these different values in your reference photo. Don't try to get it exact same as your reference photo, especially not for a drawing like this. And then same again with blending stump, just come in and just blend them all. I don't think there's anywhere where I really need to leave any out because you're not going to get highlights in these darker areas. Just think little waves and ripples when you're at this stage, because it'll just help you to get these highlights and shadowed areas looking a little bit more correct. So now I'm coming back in with white charcoal pencil, and I'm just going to start adding these little squiggly lines where it looks like to the highlighted areas. Now in the reference photo I noticed these little squiggly lines. They were actually happening, and this is just caused by the effect of the surface of the water where you've got your ripples and your waves and what have you. And this is just how the light hits the top of water, so I just started adding these little squiggly lines in between, running through your darker areas and along through your lighter areas. And sometimes they'd completely encircle like a little patch of darker area as well, in like a little circle. And then again I come back in with a blending stump and just tone them down a little bit. Don't get rid of them completely though. And then I do the same with black charcoal pencil as well. Add some darker squiggly lines on them darker areas, and also a few stray ones in them lighter areas as well. And again I come back in with that blending stump and just go over them black marks just to tone them down a little bit. And then it's just a case of just keep repeating this until you end up getting it the way that you want it to look. So I just kept layering it up with more white and black squiggles and marks and what have you, and came in with blending stump to blend them out, and then just came in with some more. So now we've moved on to a different area at water, and the texture at water is quite different here because dogs are splashing around, so they're causing a lot of, you know, different textures. It's really choppy and splashy, and you know what I mean. So I'm just coming in with some dark charcoal and just using what's excess on a blending stump and just using that blending stump to put it in there. And then where I want it to be darker, I'm going to be adding some black charcoal to them areas, and then I'll blend that with blending stump just to darken it some more. And then because all these little highlights, there's so many of them, and I want them to be quite bright, so I don't want to put too much dark underneath them, otherwise they'll not be really bright when I put them on. I'm just going to put them on now and just keep putting lots in, because like I said, the water's really splashy and choppy as there's lots and lots of highlights, so it's a little bit tedious doing it in charcoal. It's a lot easier doing this in like acrylic paint or something where you can just splat it on, you know, with splatting method, or just dab it with tip of a brush. It's a lot more difficult doing it in charcoal. Note that I did also add some highlight to the area that's shadowed, you know, under dog, under its belly there, but the highlights are not going to be as bright as them that are in direct sun, but it's important to still put some texture in them shadowed areas, otherwise it'll just look flat and just not very dynamic. So now I've done the water that's behind and to left of this dog, I'm going to get cracking on dog again now, because I'm not going to have to lean on much else, any other water that's going to be around it. And I'm just coming in with some darker charcoal and adding in your shadowed areas and what have you, and then I'm going to blend them with a stump, and then I'm going to be coming in with highlights. If you notice on the tail, the hair at the top at tail is obviously catching that sun from behind, so there's lots of highlights there, but there's also some highlights to go on underneath the tail, because the hairs that are falling away from the tail, that are coming down from the tail, are also catching a lot of that sunlight from behind. And then the middle part of the tail, you get a lot of shadowed areas on that, because obviously the tail itself, and where the hair's thickest on tail, the light can't come through it, so that area is going to be darker, and then you're going to get that band across top that's got highlights on it, and then obviously the hairs along bottom that have got highlights on them as well. Basically just a backlighting. So I'm just continuing with main part at dog's body now, and I'm just adding some dark tones with a charcoal pencil, and I'll blend them in with blending stump just to create that darker base which will provide these shadows between all your clumps of hair and all that. And once enough of that's been added in, I'll come in with white charcoal and start putting them hair textures on top, where you've got all your sunlight catching all the hair on the dog's back, the wet hair, so it looks quite spiky. And I might just tone that down a little bit with a brush, and then come back in on top with some more, and it just adds some additional depth. You'll also see me keep straying down to that water and adding a little bit more. I tend to be like that all over the place and not just sticking to one place. I'll think, oh, that bit could do with a few highlights or shadows, I'll just stick them in now and then go back to what I was doing before. But I also want to get that part at water done as well, so that when I move across to other dog, all that part at drawing is finished, and then I can move across to the other side at drawing. So anyway, some of you might be interested in my new email newsletter that I set up back end of last year. I just talk about general stuff that's going on in my life and what's happening with my art and things like that, and I might also show some artworks and sketches and what have you that you'll not see on here or on my art page on Facebook. I'll link to it in description, so if you want to subscribe to that, then be sure to head on over there and give me another sub. I've seen quite a few other artists recommend starting your own email newsletter, so I thought I'd just give it a bash, and I may as well promote it a little bit to my followers on here. And also, some of you might have noticed my community post about possibly doing a question and answer video. I managed to get a few questions out of a small number of people, but if there's anybody else that wants to ask any questions, then be sure to put them in comments. I'm trying to compile enough questions from enough people to be worth doing a video on it. It's always the case that when you're just doing videos, you get people asking all these questions, but then when you ask people to ask questions, it's like getting blood out of a stone. So yeah, if there's aught that you can think of, whether it's about this drawing or about any of my other artworks or anything general to do with art that I do, then just ask me in comments, and then I'll write it down in my list to possibly add it to a question and answer video. So you can see now I've moved on to the other dog and also started doing this stick that they're both holding. Reminds me back to when I've seen us own dogs sharing a stick like this, running around with, you know, both holding it one end and other dog at other end, and sometimes more than two dogs as well. This picture is partly a memorial piece because one of the two dogs has passed away, so I think the other one's still alive. But the person that commissioned it were actually somebody that I went to school with, and back when I was at school and I were being picked on for being good at art, and I had people jealous and ripping work up and things like that. You know, I didn't foresee people actually commissioning work from me that I went to school with, like decades down the line. So you can see that I'm doing this water on right edge of painting now, and I'm doing it different to how I did the water of the other side, in the fact that I'm putting on the darks first, just to be all inconsistent and everything and make it easier to teach other people. But anyway, I put the darks on first, probably just out of convenience, but I made sure to leave some paper blank where I'm going to be putting the lights, so that when I'm putting the darks on too thick, if you put white on top, it's never going to be its brightest. So I left some paper blank in between them dark patches, so that when I put the whites on, they're still going to be nice and bright. That side at drawing does look a bit darker in footage, and that's because the light that I've got, it's just a little bit over to the left, so it illuminates the left side at drawing a little bit more than right side at drawing. So if it looks a little bit darker, that's why it is. I've since got a new light for Christmas, so I've now got two lights that sit above my drawings, and there's going to be one like at each end at drawing, so both ends at drawing are going to be sort of equally lit, which will be a little bit better in future videos. So anyway, I'm still mainly doing the same processes as what I did on the left side at drawing, the layering up with the darks and the lights, and then using a blending stump and the paintbrush to soften things in between, blend things in between, and then adding some more. It's just pretty much the same thing. One thing I will say about the charcoal drawings, in contrast to paintings, is that they are a bit looser, so I'm working a bit quicker and I'm not being too precise and exact with my strokes and what have you. I'm just letting it flow a little bit more. Even though it still looks realistic, it's definitely got a more loose look to it, especially when you look closer up at it. It is nice to loosen up a little bit in between doing painting when everything's so painstaking on detailing layers. I think the most tedious thing in this drawing were all them tiny little highlights that around dogs where they're splashing around, which is a little bit more difficult to do with a charcoal pencil as opposed to when you're painting and you can just splatter it on. Like I said, works a lot easier doing it that way. You can see the little splashes in front of this dog on right, and the key to getting them little splashes correct is to not think too much into it. It's just a case of putting it in and not being too meticulous and trying to get it too perfect. It's just like little bent rows of water, sort of like spider's legs kind of effect. And then just adding some random lighter bits to it where there's light catching it and things like that. And the trick to getting shadows to look correct is to, like I already said, is to make sure there's still some detail in it. So adding some highlights in it that are not as bright, you know, little flecks of light that are a little bit more dim than them that are in direct sun. Especially in edges, you'll get more sort of bleeding into edges, and then you'll get some darker flecks bleeding into highlighted areas, and that just gives the illusion of rippling water where you're not going to get such a defined line between your area that's highlighted and your area that's in shadow, because the surface of water is going to be quite uneven. So I'm not far off finishing this drawing now. I'm just going around giving it some final touches, and then I'll show you the final reveal. But if you've been watching this video and you've managed to get this far, thank you first of all. And if you're new here and you've been enjoying this video, then it'd be really nice if you subscribed. I'm trying to push for my next milestone now, which is 3,000. And giving my video a like is also really helpful. It helps it to get pushed out to more people, and just helps me channel in general so that I can keep on putting more videos up here for you lot. Also, don't forget to ask any questions in comments for an upcoming question and answer video, and If you've got any questions about this drawing, also add them to comments. Say if you want a more in-depth tutorial on one part of it or something like that. I'm always up for new ideas for more videos. So anyway, I'm coming to end of this one now, so I'll leave you with the final reveal and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!